In these times of ecological sensitivity, an affordable, rear-wheel driven, aggressively styled sports car designed to experience nothing but pure driving enjoyment looks like a fairy tale. Too good to become true. Especially from a company that is mainly known for building hybrids. With its lightweight body, low-mounted powertrain and a driving position close to the rear axle, the Toyota GT86 looks like the blueprint for a classic sports car. It weighs well under 1300 kilograms and has a weight distribution of 53% at the front and 47% in the rear. But is this really the modern day engineering exercise in driving pleasure that everybody talks about? I can honestly say that I have never been more eager to drive a Japanese car than this little Toyota.
Now driving this car in town, I have to say it does feel like a proper sports car. The steering is pretty heavy considering that the tires are really small and the gears take a little bit of force to shift. The clutch is very sensitive, so those are things that make this car not so nice for driving in town. So I guess the best thing to do is to take it to my favorite driving roads, because that's where this car belongs, to see what it performs like there.
Equipped with a limited slip differential and powered by a high-revving naturally aspirated 2-liter boxer engine developing 200 horsepower and 205 Nm of torque, the GT86 accelerates from 0 to 100 kph in 7.6 seconds and achieves a top speed of 226.
Now the engine is the most controversial part about this car, because you really have to rev it out all the way to the red line to get those 200 horses. Does it feel underpowered for me? Not on a B road, but I wasn't really liking it when I couldn't escape from a 2-liter Golf diesel on the autobahn. But we will talk about the autobahn later on in the video. As some of you know, I'm a huge fan of naturally aspirated engines, so I like this car for that reason. But I have to say the throttle could feel a little bit more responsive, and the gear ratios seem to be a bit too long for me, considering the rather small amount of available torque from this engine. The pleasant side effect of this is that you get a very good fuel economy. I'm averaging about 8 liters right now. And that's very different from my experience with these new downsized engines, which are turbocharged or supercharged or both. And when you try to get some performance from them, they usually really start drinking. And this car doesn't. You can really work it, and it never takes more than 10 liters, I would say.
Most modern cars don't really involve you into the driving anymore, and their limit is often far beyond anything a normal driver can experience on the road. In this respect, the GT86 is meant to be different. Less grip from the skinny tires should equal more fun.
Now the first reaction driving this car in corners is normal and safe understeer. And I have to say, this chassis really feels great. The car has a great balance and feels very agile. However, there's one thing that surprised me, and that's how high the level of grip is. And still, driving this car in the standard mode with the traction control and the stability control on, the stability control cuts in quite early. when you are trying to accelerate out of a corner, it will hold back the throttle for a second or so until it will let you accelerate out of the corner. Good in the wet, but not so much fun in the dry. Now the second stage is the VSC Sport mode, which is much nicer to drive. It will give you a little bit of slip on the rear axle, while at the same time the stability control still stays on. But I have to say, I'm quite surprised how high the limit of this car is. You really have to carry quite a lot of speed through the corners to make this car slide a little bit. And that's actually a bit disappointing for me, because I didn't expect this car to have so much grip, even driving here on damp roads with winter tires. Now the drifting is what everybody talks about, and Toyota has even embedded it in the logo for the GT86. But when you decide to switch off all the safety guards in this car, you should be aware of the fact that the GT86 has a rather small window of stability. And you have to remember, you are not able to drift this car because it has the power or the torque to do so. You're drifting this car because of its chassis. And that usually means that you have to carry quite a lot of speed to get this reaction to make the car slide. And then it's quite easy to mismatch the right amount of steering and throttle input that is needed to control the slide. So even though I might disappoint some of you, and even though I might sound like a sissy here, my advice would be to be mindful not to try this on a public road, but to practice it in a safe environment, as it's really easy to mismatch the right amount of throttle and steering that is needed.
So as expected, on a twisty road the GT86 is good fun, even though it takes a fair bit of time to become one with it and the limit is much higher than I expected. However, with the suspension setup for great handling and agility, the GT86 has one big downside: high speed. The combination of its hypersensitive steering and firm suspension makes this one of the most fatiguing cars to drive on the autobahn I have ever experienced. The ride is bone-shaking hard, while the steering requires nerve-wracking attention driving high-speed corners, and the rear axle often feels as if it is about to drift away from you. And that's all before you're getting absolutely smoked by a 2-liter diesel once the road steepens. The interior is great looking, with very supportive sport seats and the smallest steering wheel ever fitted into a Toyota. Sadly, it only tilts 15 and telescopes 20mm, so that a 6'4" tall person like me can't find a good driving position. It still seems like the Japanese only build longer seat rails into their cars for the European market, but forget about people's arms. The hype about the GT86 and its siblings from Scion and Subaru was one of the reasons why my expectations for this car have been higher than ever before. Less grip, more excitement. On the racetrack, in isolation on a twisty road or in the wet, it works excellent. But for me, the GT86 is limited to those rare occasions, as there aren't as many places and situations where it can be driven hard enough to work its magic, as there are those where it just feels unpleasant to drive. I adore its styling and I love the idea and the philosophy behind the GT86. But the fact that it's too uncomfortable to be used as a daily driver in town and on the autobahn is a big drawback for me.
So Toyota, can you please do two things for me? Give this car a steering column that is so adjustable that I can sit comfortable in this car. And can you please think about giving this car adjustable suspension like you get it in most German cars, to make it a bit more comfortable and a bit more usable? Because if you do so, I'm completely sold, to be honest.